My grandfather, Arthur Washington, was a man carved from Georgia red clay and quiet dignity. For 40 years, from the time I was a little girl until the day he drew his last breath at 68, he was the head gardener at the Sterling estate. The estate was more than a home. It was a kingdom that overlooked our small town of Harmony Creek, a constant reminder of the man who owned it all, Alistair Sterling. Grandpa's hands, calloused and strong, could coax life from the most stubborn soil. They were the same hands that held me when I fell, the same hands that smelled perpetually of earth and rose petals. He was a man of few words, his silence a vast peaceful ocean, or so I thought. The funeral was 3 days ago. Now I stood in the humid quiet of his small shotgun-style house, the air thick with the scent of sawdust and old books. He didn't have much. A worn armchair, a shelf of dog-eared histories, and a workshop out back that was his true sanctuary. My task was to saw through a lifetime of possessions, a job that felt both sacred and heartbreaking. In his workshop, beneath a dusty workbench where he fixed the town's lawnmowers for a few extra dollars, my fingers brushed against a cold metal box. It was an old army surplus case painted olive drab with a heavy latch that groaned in protest. My heart hammered against my ribs. Grandpa was not a man for secrets. His life was an open book, wasn't it? Simple, honorable work. Church on Sunday. A quiet nod to neighbors. I found the key on a nail behind an old calendar, its metal cool and smooth in my trembling hand. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed to echo through the past 40 years. Inside there was no money, no hidden treasure, just paper, and a single faded photograph. I lifted it into the sliver of sunlight cutting through the dusty window. It showed 2 young men, no older than 20, standing proudly in front of a small, cluttered workshop. One was a young Alistair Sterling, his ambition already glinting in his sharp eyes. The other was my grandfather. Young, vibrant, a confident smile on his face I had never seen before. They weren't boss and employee. They stood shoulder to shoulder, equals, partners. On the back, in my grandfather's neat architectural script, were 4 words. Sterling and Washington. Our beginning. 1968. My breath caught in my throat. Sterling and Washington. Not just Sterling. Beneath the photo lay a stack of brittle yellowed papers. They were technical drawings, blueprints for a compact, high-efficiency irrigation pump. The very invention that had revolutionized agriculture in the South and became the cornerstone of Sterling Industries, a multi-billion-dollar empire. And on every single page, in the bottom right corner, were 2 signatures. Alistair Sterling, Arthur Washington. It was the last item in the box that shattered me. A bundle of letters tied with twine, addressed to Alistair Sterling. None of them had ever been sent. I opened the first one, dated June 1970, 2 years after the photo was taken. My grandfather's voice, clear and strong, rose from the page. Alistair, it began. I saw the patent filing in the paper. My name is not on it. You know my mind is in that design as much as yours. My hands built the first prototype. This was to be our future, together. Please, make this right. Letter after letter told a story of escalating betrayal. The polite inquiries turned to desperate pleas, then to dignified, heartbroken resignation. The last letter from 1975 was barely a paragraph. You have built a kingdom on my silence, old friend. You have taken my name, my work, and my future. I will not fight you in the courts. I have a family to protect, and I know the kind of man you have become. But know this. Every rose that blooms in your garden will be a testament to the work of a man you erased. And I will tend them. And I will remember. That silence of his wasn't peace. It was a tombstone. A lifetime of pain, swallowed down every single day as he knelt on the very land that should have been his, tending the roses of the man who had stolen his soul. The quiet dignity I had always admired was a shield, forged in the fires of the deepest betrayal imaginable. I felt a rage so pure and cold it terrified me. My grandfather wasn't just a gardener. He was an inventor, a founder, a king in exile forced to serve in the court of the usurper. The next morning, I took the box and drove to the one person in town who might remember that far back. Mr. Henderson, a retired mechanic who ran the oldest auto shop in Harmony Creek. He was one of Grandpa's few close friends. I found him under the hood of a vintage Ford, his face streaked with grease. I didn't say a word. I just opened the box on his workbench. He looked at the photo, then the blueprints, and a deep sigh rattled his chest. He wiped his hands on a rag, his eyes clouded with memory. I remember, he said, his voice low. I remember when they were just two kids in a garage dreaming of changing the world. Arthur, he was the real genius. Alistair was the talker, the salesman. When Sterling got the big investment from Atlanta, Arthur was suddenly just out. Alistair told everyone they'd had a falling out over money, that Arthur had taken a buyout. We all knew it was a lie, but what could we do? Sterling owned the bank, the mill, everything. To go against him was to lose your home, your job. Your grandfather chose to protect his family. He looked me straight in the eye. That silence cost him everything, but he did it for you, Lena. For your mother. His words solidified my resolve. This wasn't about money. It was about a name. It was about truth. That afternoon, I drove through the wrought iron gates of the Sterling estate. I didn't ask for an appointment. I walked past the startled staff holding my box and went straight to the sprawling back terrace overlooking the prize-winning rose gardens. Alistair Sterling sat there in a wicker chair, a shrunken, frail version of the Titan in the old photograph. He was 90 now, but his eyes were still sharp, cold, and calculating. He watched me approach, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I'm Lena Washington, Arthur's granddaughter." I placed the open box on the table between us. He glanced at the photo, his lips thinning into a bloodless line. He didn't feign ignorance or surprise. "I always knew this day might come," he rasped. "Your grandfather was a brilliant man, a good man. You destroyed him," I said, the words raw. "You stole his life's work, his name." A flicker of something, annoyance, not remorse, crossed his face. "I made that work matter," he snapped, his voice gaining strength. A black man's name on a patent in Georgia in 1970? It would have been a novelty, a footnote. It would have gone nowhere. I built an empire. I gave him a job for life. He had security. He had a cage, I countered, my voice rising. You put him in a cage in a garden built on his own genius, and you made him tend it for 40 years. That wasn't security. That was a life sentence. He leaned forward, his eyes like chips of ice. He stayed quiet for a reason. I made it clear to him early on that a man with a young family has a lot to lose. His silence kept your mother safe. It kept you safe. He made a choice. He chose you. The confession hung in the air, more damning than any denial. It wasn't just theft. It was coercion. A lifetime of quiet threat. My grandfather hadn't been passive. He had been a protector, sacrificing his own legacy to guarantee mine. I stood there for a long moment, looking from the frail monster in the chair to the roses my grandfather had poured his broken heart into. I finally understood. A legal battle would be his word against the ghosts, a mess of statutes of limitation and corporate lawyers. He would die before a verdict was ever reached. But the truth had its own power. I closed the box. "You're right," I said softly. "He did choose me, and now I'm making a choice for him." I didn't sue. I didn't demand a cent. The next week, an investigative journalist from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution received a package. It contained copies of everything in the metal box and a detailed account of my grandfather's life. The story, "The Gardener and the King," ran on the front page the following Sunday. It was a story of genius, of a friendship, of a bitter betrayal, and of the systemic injustice that allowed it to happen. It didn't destroy Sterling Industries, but it shattered the myth of Alistair Sterling. It put a permanent stain on his celebrated name. Last week I went to my grandfather's grave. The small, simple headstone read, "Arthur Washington, beloved father and grandfather." I laid down a single perfect sterling rose, its petals the color of a blushing dawn. "They know your name now, Grandpa," I whispered, the wind carrying my words across the Georgia hills. "They finally know who you were." His silence was over. His story had finally been told. What would you do in this situation? Share in the comments. If this story moved you, like and share. For more cinematic life stories told with depth and heart, subscribe to Voice of Sophia and ring the bell for notifications. Thank you for listening, for feeling, and for being part of this community. See you in the next story.